At a time of mounting crises across the Middle East and beyond, ministers and officials from the Gulf Cooperation Council and the Russian Federation gathered in Moscow. Hosted by Russian Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov, this was the 8th joint ministerial meeting of the strategic dialogue, designed to strengthen cooperation, but overshadowed by urgent questions of war, sovereignty, and peace. This session was more than diplomatic formality. It was a platform to confront threats to regional and global security, to address territorial disputes, and most importantly, to respond to a new Israeli strike, one that Qatar described as nothing less than state terrorism. From the outset, Gulf representatives delivered one of their strongest collective statements yet. They denounced what they called a flagrant assault on Qatar's sovereignty. Officials declared it is regrettable and denounced with the strongest expressions of condemnation and denunciation the brutal attack by the Israeli occupation forces on the lands of the state of Qatar, which constitutes a flagrant violation of its sovereignty and territorial integrity and contravenes international principles and laws and the Charter of the United Nations. This condemnation was not symbolic. GCC states stressed their full solidarity with Qatar and promised to use all available resources to confront the attack. They appealed to the international community to step in, warning that unchecked Israeli aggression threatened not only Qatar, but also the fragile pathways toward peace in Gaza. They emphasized, without a doubt, this attack undermines the efforts and good endeavors undertaken by the state of Qatar within the framework of its mediation to cease fire in the Gaza Strip and release hostages and detainees, and constitutes a serious obstacle to international and regional efforts aimed at establishing peace in the Middle East region. Attention then turned to the humanitarian catastrophe unfolding in Gaza. The GCC statement described a relentless campaign of destruction. They warned, the continuation of Israeli violations against the Palestinian people and the crime of genocide it is committing against the population of the Gaza Strip, and the deliberate blockade policy that led to famine in the Strip, and its continued destruction of residential neighborhoods, hospitals, schools, universities, mosques and churches, which aims to displace the population of the Strip and settle it. Equally damning was their accusation of aid obstruction. We condemn the continued targeting of humanitarian and international organizations operating in the Gaza Strip by the Israeli occupation forces and the obstruction of the arrival of relief and humanitarian aid. This criticism was paired with international alignment. They commended Security Council Resolution 2730 on protecting humanitarian workers and ensuring unhindered aid. And once more, they underscored the long-standing Arab consensus. The Cooperation Council affirms its firm position on the centrality of the Palestinian issue and the necessity of ending the Israeli occupation and establishing an independent Palestinian state on the 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital. Beyond the Palestinian struggle, the meeting revisited long-standing territorial disputes that have defined Gulf politics for decades. On Iran, ministers were firm. They reiterated support for the United Arab Emirates in its claim to 3 disputed islands. The statement was clear. The Council reiterates its support for the sovereignty right of the United Arab Emirates over its 3 islands, territorial waters, airspace, continental shelf, and exclusive economic zone of the 3 islands, considering them an integral part of the United Arab Emirates territory. Any Iranian activity on the islands, they declared, was null and void. Iran, they insisted, must either engage in direct negotiations or accept international arbitration. The Council also addressed Iraq, emphasizing the importance of navigation rights in Khor Abdullah and urging Baghdad to respect Kuwait's sovereignty. Security Council Resolution 833 and bilateral agreements from 2012 and 2014 were cited as the framework for resolving disputes. On Syria, the GCC renewed support for the country's sovereignty, denounced Israeli strikes, and stressed the need to combat extremism while preserving national unity. The war in Ukraine also featured prominently. The GCC outlined its position as rooted in international law, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. The joint declaration stated, the Cooperation Council affirms that a peaceful settlement through dialogue and negotiations and non-military escalation is the only way to resolve the crisis. The Council highlighted its humanitarian mediation, including prisoner exchanges, detainee releases, and family reunifications. It also emphasized contributions to global food security by facilitating grain and food exports. There was cautious optimism that recent US and Russian talks, alongside earlier Riyadh meetings, could build momentum toward peace. But it was Qatar's intervention that electrified the session. Speaking with urgency, Qatar's foreign minister described the attack on Doha not as an isolated incident, but as an act of state terrorism. He declared, "The state of Qatar has been subjected to a treacherous attack that embodies an image of the organized state terrorism practiced by the Israeli entity, led by its prime minister, and within the framework of its systematic policies to destabilize regional security and stability." Qatar, he said, was already taking action. The state of Qatar will not hesitate to defend its sovereignty and territorial integrity, and has begun forming a legal team to take all legal measures to respond to this attack. Responsibility, he argued, was clear. We hold the government of the Israeli entity fully responsible for the escalating regional tensions and for the dire consequences of its policy. And the consequences, he warned, were grave. The hostile escalation that leads to the repercussions of an unprecedented catastrophe threatens the collapse of all paths to a peaceful solution in the region. Qatar's position on the Palestinians remained unwavering. Its foreign minister reaffirmed, "The state of Qatar affirms its firm position in support of the Palestinian people in their just cause and continues its political and humanitarian efforts with its regional and international partners to reach an immediate ceasefire, protect civilians, end the occupation, and achieve the two-state solution that guarantees the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people and leads to the establishment of an independent sovereign state on the 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital." He described the most recent strike in Doha, which targeted Hamas figures during negotiations, as a flagrant breach of law and decency. This aggression resulted in the loss of innocent lives in a flagrant violation and flagrant breach of the provisions of international law, the Charter of the United Nations and international norms. His condemnation was unequivocal. This aggression can only be described as state terrorism and reflects its arrogance, contempt, and recklessness. It threatens international peace and security, squanders the collective security system of the international community, and undermines any effort made to resolve conflicts through peaceful means. Qatar's plea to the international community was stark. This requires the international community to be aware of its commitment to its legal and moral obligation to deter Israel and hold it accountable for what it has done. The crimes it committed and forced it to comply with the rules of international law, and saying otherwise means that the global collective security system becomes a term without any content. In these words, Qatar captured the frustration of many in the region, the sense that the rules of international order were being openly flouted without consequence. Despite the gravity of these crises, the Moscow meeting was not only about condemnation, it was also about charting future cooperation with Russia. Qatar stressed that its strategic partnership with Moscow had grown significantly in energy, security, and economics. The action plan agreed in 2023, running through 2028, was hailed as a framework for deeper collaboration. On the humanitarian front, Qatar pointed to a remarkable success: its role in reuniting 107 children with their families through mediation between Russia and Ukraine. For Qatari officials, this was proof that dialogue, not force, could deliver lasting stability. The meeting closed with thanks to Russia for hosting, to Kuwait for its presidency of the GCC, and to the Secretariat for organising. The final words from Qatar's foreign minister underscored both resolve and partnership. "We affirm our constant keenness to enhance constructive strategic dialogue between the GCC countries and the Russian Federation in a way that serves the interests of our peoples and a future without them." As the delegations departed Moscow, the message was clear. The Gulf states and Russia intend to deepen ties, even as the region reels from war and instability. The tone was urgent, defiant, but also pragmatic. A recognition that diplomacy remains the only path forward, however fraught that path may be.